All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining today's online seminar, Blockchain Basics, Introduction to the Technology. My name is Benjamin Schaub. I'm a project manager at the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center. And with me today is Stefan Schmitt. He will give the presentation in a few minutes. He's a colleague of mine from the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center as well. So before we start, let me give you a quick overview of today's agenda. I will briefly introduce the project blockchains. This is why we are here today. And then Stefan will hold his presentation for around 30 minutes. And afterwards, we will have a Q&A session for around 15 minutes. I will moderate your questions from the chat box and Stefan will provide the answers. And we would like to invite you and encourage you to ask questions also during the session. As most of you have seen, this can easily be done in YouTube. Just use the chat box on your right-hand side. And as I said, we will try our best to answer your questions in the end. All right, now let's talk about blockchains for a moment. The project is funded by the European Union Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Framework Program. And this project focuses on the use case implementation in the field of blockchain. So our goal is to match startups which have the technological expertise with small and medium-sized enterprises that could somehow benefit from the application of blockchain or DLT solutions, but they don't really understand the technology or they do not have the required know-how or the budget to implement such a use case. And on the overall level, our goal is to gain insights in blockchain technology and its use case implementation, and to see what works in which framework and what doesn't. And with all the learnings, we will then provide a policy recommendation at the end of the project for the European Union. So how does the project work? There have been 2 open calls where interested startups were able to send their proposals, including their use case they would like to implement. And then the best startups will receive a funding, and this depends on certain factors, for example, their business case, their blockchain expertise, or the quality of their counterpart, small and medium-sized enterprise. And our second call just recently finished. We received 111 proposals from 27 countries all across Europe, which shows that there's a great interest in the project, and this is obviously a great result. So what happens after we receive a proposal? They get evaluated, and the best up to 18 projects from each call, they advance to the immersion phase. And in the immersion phase, there's a pitch contest and pitch evaluation also. The winners from this phase, then up to 12 projects, they advance to the implementation phase. And during the implementation phase, we will develop certain KPIs and track their progress. And then the funding depends on the fulfillment of these KPIs. And as you can see in the end, the best 2 startups from each call will receive a prize, which means that the funding for a startup can be up to 50,000 euro in total. So just a few words about the involved partner companies. We have Zabala, it's a Spanish small and medium-sized enterprise. They are very experienced in the management of innovation activities. Then we have Innomine. It's an innovation management, innovation funding firm from Hungary. And we have the Illustria Consortium. They have members across all industries in Spain, and they support the project with a semi-public blockchain DLT infrastructure, which is in accordance with the European regulation. And then last but not least, the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center. We provide the SMEs and the startups with technical and business insights in blockchain technology. And for this, we designed and developed the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center Academy. And I would like to give one example. This is one of our courses. It's called the Blockchain Masterclass, and it covers a wide range of blockchain areas Topics includes, for example, the identification of use cases and successful implementation. We cover technical aspects of the technology as well as some regulatory topics. Yeah, we would be happy if you visit our site and try a course or one of the free lectures which are available, and obviously we keep them updated, so you can come back in a couple of weeks probably, and then we have some new lectures. So right now there are topics available, for example, like the future of money or the digital programmable euro. So I will now hand over to Stefan, but before we start, just a few words about him. Stefan Schmitt, he works as a project manager for the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center, as I already said, and he's also the product owner of the Frankfurt School Blockchain Academy. So if you have questions regarding the academy, he will be the person to answer them. And he also works at the International Token Standardization Association, another very exciting project in the field. So, Stefan, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Benjamin, for the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. As said, we are going to talk about blockchain basics a little, and actually, before the Q&A, which I invited you to post questions into the chat during this online seminar, I'll talk about some of our educational offerings as well. But let's get started with the presentation. So I want to talk about three things with you. First, let's talk about the motivation. So what is the value that blockchain provides? And there we are going to talk about recent news. Actually, there's something really fresh from Germany, and I will send you a link into the chat later on. Then we will come to theory. So how does blockchain work? And I will try to give you a really high level but easy to understand example, so that for all of you that begin their blockchain journey, that might not know too much, you understand a little more, and I have the basics down to maybe start learning on your own, or maybe watch some of our free videos, whatever. And then we go from how does blockchain work to how does blockchain work in reality. So what are applications, what's happening at the market at the moment. And there I will also just provide a high-level overview for three, I think, really interesting topics: payments, tokenization, and the digital euro. Yeah, and then we'll have the Q&A. So the motivation. Let's start with the history of blockchain and probably the three reasons that people are familiar with blockchain. And, oh, by the way, maybe you might hear some noises in the background. I really hope you don't, but it feels like I'm living on a construction site today. These people just started doing, I don't know what, maybe 30 minutes ago, and I really hope it's not annoying. Anyways, so history of blockchain. I believe that people know blockchain from one of three events. First, Bitcoin. Everyone knows Bitcoin. This doesn't mean that people particularly like Bitcoin. I think there's a lot of people that want to make money with it. Some still believe that it's the #1 currency for money laundering and buying drugs, whatever. What can be said for sure, Bitcoin is now running for 11 years, and there might have been minor problems with it, but it's the first blockchain application. And as it's not hacked, as it's still working as it should be, I think it's a good proof that the technology actually works. The second event, as you can see, and this graph is pretty old, it's from 2019, more or less 1 year old, but not too much changed. What you can see here is that crypto, since inception, really wasn't on the radar until 2017, and then in the end of 2017 we saw the rise of cryptocurrencies, and then afterwards the crypto winter and the fall. And I think this is an event that a lot of people got introduced to cryptocurrencies, but maybe not blockchain. And I think this is a really important difference, because blockchain as a technology can be used for a lot of more use cases than just payments. And I will show you a little bit about that later on. But while this graph might look pretty depressing, because it goes down so fast and so much, actually, I believe that this was a pretty good event, because first it got a lot of attention to blockchain, and then a lot of these scammers or people that just promised you something but could never hold up to these promises dropped out. And so I think right now we have a lot more cautious investors and people that stuck in the space take it seriously. And then last, Libra. We'll talk about that later on a little bit as well. It's the cryptocurrency initiated by Facebook, but actually supported by a lot of companies. And I think this is the third event because this is the first blockchain project that really has a global scale and might have really strong impact. We don't know how this turns out, but I think it's really exciting. And actually, we have a free lecture on that. So one of my colleagues, Jonas Groß, talked about that, and I will send you the link later on to that as well. And so let's go through some nice screenshots. So blockchain really, as you could see, until 2017 was a niche technology. Some people already used it, but it really changed when, or one of the major changes to got accepted on a global space and also for economic purposes is when Xi Jinping, president of China, published the blockchain strategy and had a talk in the Congress. And this brought a lot of attention because China actually is currently the leading nation when it comes to blockchain, and they really doubled down. And you can see that in recent developments, for example, for their digital currency that they are working on, as well as when you look at funding or spending of industrial companies when it comes to blockchain technology. So this is really interesting. The good news is, even though I said China's leading, I wouldn't say that Europe is too far behind. Actually, blockchain might be one of the few technologies we are not sleeping on, but might take a leading role in. And one of the best examples for that is the blockchain strategy of the German government. This is also already a year old. And what they had talked about was making crypto custody or custody of digital assets, of tokenized assets, a BaFin regulated or licensed service. And this actually went into action on the 1st of January this year. And there's some companies in the grandfathering process at the moment, and they will soon all apply, or these that want to offer this financial service will all apply for the BaFin license, which is a pretty cool development. And you could really observe that in Germany, this brought a lot of A, attention, obviously, to the topic, but B, also a lot of certainty and formerly really hesitant companies that were just observing the market now warm up to the topic and want to do more with the technology. And I think, for the financial sector, for big industrial companies, some degree of certainty, some legal framework is really necessary. And both the blockchain strategy as well as making custody a licensed financial service was a step into the right direction. And what also was one of the promises or ideas behind the blockchain strategy of the German government was to make shares really digital, so electronical shares or securities. Actually, they wanted to test it out with bonds first, and then people really hoped that after this would go well, that it would be expanded for shares. Actually, you can see here the news is from the 12th of March 2019. Unfortunately, for a long time, not too much has happened. But this article is from today. you can see something happened. Security has become digital. Philipp Sandner, he's the head of the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center, so Benjamin's and mine's boss. And he just wrote an article about it, because actually now we see some movement from the legislator. And I will share the link with you later on as well, so you might be up to date when it comes to that. And to be frank, a lot of other people also share their opinions on it. And I think this is a topic really where you shouldn't just read one article, but maybe 2 or 3 to see it from different perspectives, maybe from a more legal perspective, from a more business perspective, just to make sure. And so I would say the 3 events are the ones you know, or most know blockchain from. These recent news are the reason why it's still relevant, and today more relevant than ever. And now I want to introduce you to a concept that we call the Internet of Value, and I will go through it really quickly to show how blockchain can actually provide value. And what we will do, we will look at speed, cost, size, and security for 4 examples. And we will start with a mailbox. And so before we come to value, we come to the internet for information. And so what happened is that in the past, we were using mail to deliver information. You could you would take a paper, an envelope, need a post stamp, send it, and maybe then 3 days later your letter arrives at a different company, a family member, whatever. So when we look at speed, we can say it's not really fast. I would say fastest is if you pay a lot of extra. You could get it delivered in several hours or next day maybe. About cost, it's not too expensive, but still you need to buy some of these items. You need a post stamp. So really every mail you send, every letter you send will cost you money. I would say in Germany, it will start with 60, 70 cents. And when you look at the size, then you can combine it. The more information you want to send, the more expensive it gets. If you want to send a book, you will have to pay more. And lastly, for security, as you can see here with the post box, something could happen to it. Someone could crack it open, try to steal the mail. Maybe some bad person lights it up and it's burning. Maybe the post delivery driver, for some reason, loses your letter. A lot of that can happen. And why? Because you have a lot of single points of failure. And this is something that blockchain can help with and that the internet helped with as well when it comes to information. And so this really is a more 1999 mailbox, but I think you get the idea. With email, and now if we look at these 4 variables, speed, it's instant. Cost, when you have access to the internet, there's not really cost attached to it. Size, you can send an email with just saying okay, or you could just forward an email without putting in anything, or you could attach links to videos. You could attach complete books. So the amount of information you can now send really grew. And lastly, for the security, and I just use here the security of delivery as an example. For example, if you use Google Mail, your mail will be delivered. If the data center in Germany burns down, this is maybe pretty unfortunate. Maybe it takes a little longer to send your mail, but it will be sent. When you look at security from a perspective, can someone else read your email? I'm not expert on that field. I guess there's more secure services than others, but let's not talk about that here. And now we come to money. As we said, the internet of value, right? Here you can see cash, paper money. And first, let's talk about here the same things again: speed, cost, size, security. So speed, One thing that is certain, you can only pay when you directly face the person that you are buying something from. So this means it's instant in the moment, but obviously it takes time to get there. About the size, obviously you could do every payment and every order of size that you wanted with cash. Probably at some point you would feel a little scared that maybe someone is going to rob you, or the other person would not be completely comfortable, for example, receiving a payment installment when you build your house or buy a Ferrari for whatever, 500,000 euros. Probably this will happen not in cash. And lastly, security, I talked about it already. A, you have counterfeit money, and B, you have the opportunity that you are getting robbed, that you lose the money. So I don't want to talk bad about cash, but there's a reason why we have digital payments today. And now you say, hey, Stefan, why do I need blockchain if I already have digital payments? We all use online banking today. Why is this not enough? And here, when we look at these four variables again, we see that speed, payments in the SEPA area can be instant, but often they are not, but they could be. But as soon as we look at international payments, you will agree that the speed, it takes some time, maybe 2-3 days. It's not really super cheap when we look at the cost. I would say 3 to 5, 6, 7, 8% for foreign payments isn't unheard of. Security-wise, first, it looks really good, but the security is just good because we all trust the banks in between. But we have seen times where the trust in banks was really diminished. And furthermore, banks have a way to get security that they have their central data center. And if you can get in there, they have a problem. And so they build a lot of walls and layers of security around it, which often proves really successful. But makes it also pretty hard to work with the systems for them, and also expensive to maintain, and these costs have to go somewhere. And so now we have blockchain. And I want to highlight one important difference between blockchain and payments through blockchain, and that we have with banks. And this is that for blockchain, you don't need this central counterparty, and also the central or single point of failure in this case, that is the bank. But you can have payment systems that are controlled and maintained by a lot of nodes, by a lot of network participants that control each other, instead of having someone the two parties trusts within them or in between them. And I would say for this, we will look at an example a little later on. But for now, just imagine that with blockchain, you can solve one important problem that we had with digital payments before. Imagine you had digital payments without a bank. How could you trust? Or let me give a different example. It's easy in the internet to distribute one image to 1 million people, right? I can upload it on Facebook. I can upload a movie on YouTube. We had all these video and music piracy websites, sharing websites. It's really easy if someone has one image to send it to millions and billions of people. And you also know it's nearly impossible to get these digital information out of the internet. One of the best examples is a picture of Beyonce that doesn't look great, and she wanted it to be taken down. And every year at this date, people make fun of her because it's impossible. And so with blockchain, you have the potential to send a digital value to someone else. And when you send it, you don't have possession or ownership of it anymore, and the other person has. So you don't copy something a million times. There's exactly one version of it, and you can send it to someone else. And this is the Internet of Value and the value that blockchain can provide. But now this got really theoretical already. So let's go to the second portion, and let me give you 2 blockchain examples. But before we come to that, let me show you this word cloud of blockchain buzzwords, I think, which is a really good example why blockchain isn't as widely adopted as some people might hope. And I would say the reason behind it is there's so much to know about it. It's really complex. It's extremely difficult to learn about it. And it's a concept that a lot of people didn't have touching points before. And what I can promise you is 2 things. First, we won't talk about most of these words today. And second, we, in the course that Benjamin talked about it before, we actually go through everything that is listed here and try to make sense of it. But for now, let's start with a really easy example, and please don't be offended because this is a child's game. I just chose it because I think most of you are familiar with the game of Uno or comparable games, and second, because this is a game, unlike poker, which does not have a bank. And that we don't have a bank, like some oversight is really important here for the all of the analogy. And so how does Uno work? You have cards. On the cards, you have two kinds of information. First, the color, and then the number, or here what you can see, the action. And the rules are simple. You can play blue on blue, green on green, or you can play 8 on 8 or 6 on 6, and so on. And this is more or less it. And the way it works is it starts with 1 card laying down here. Each player, I don't know, gets 6 or 7 cards, and then they play one after each other, and they make sure that nobody is cheating. There are rules. They might have some specifications for the rules, but once they start, they make sure that nobody's cheating. And when someone does, he will not be able to do it because the others will tell him. And now let's try to make this into blockchain. So first, think of a block in the blockchain as one of these cards. So a block stores information. Here you would have the 8 and the green. And there's a lot of blocks. But what's more important here is the blockchain. So we start with 1 card, let's say the green 3. And from then on, a lot of new cards are added. And whenever someone plays the card, the others will look at it and make sure that the rules were not broken or violated. And then this move is accepted, or in blockchain terms, the block would be added and the transaction is validated. And we will look at that really soon. And so what you can see here, the blockchain is transparent. So all the 3 nodes, the 3 players or network participants can look at it. They could, in theory, take all the cards and go through it to see if something bad happened in the past. They control each other, and there is no central entity that is required to oversee this process. Because even though these 3 parties might not trust each other because they watch over each other, they can trust the data that is on the blockchain. And now, with this example in mind, let's look at an example blockchain transaction. And as said, this is really easy as well. And let's just imagine you were to send, let's say, 1 Bitcoin. I mean, it's a massive amount of money, but just to have a good example, you want to send 1 Bitcoin to someone else. And so this is you. And you request a transaction. So you send this transaction to the other nodes in the network, and you say, hey, I want to send 1 Bitcoin from A to B. And the other nodes will validate the transaction, which means they go through the whole blockchain. From the last block to the first block, they will check your account number, let's say. If you have 1 Bitcoin, or if you maybe try to send a Bitcoin that you don't have, this is what I said, you can't cheat, right? You can only send something that you possess. And once they certify that, they validate the transaction. The transaction lands in a transaction pool for 1 block. And once this transaction pool is full, the block is finished. All transactions within the block are verified. And this new block is appended to the end of the blockchain using cryptography. But you can see now, because it's a chain of blocks, right? It's a blockchain. And then the whole process starts with someone else requesting a transaction and so on. All the transactions land here, block is finished, new block, and so on. And now the transaction was successfully completed. You don't own the Bitcoin anymore, someone else has it. And this process is the important differentiation factor between what we could do before and the value that blockchain brings. Because now, you know, you could own one Bitcoin and try to send this one Bitcoin to 10 people. But not in fractions, not 0.1 Bitcoins, but really make 10 out of 1. And this will fail here. So they will validate the first transaction, but for the next 9 transactions, they will say, sorry, you just own 1 Bitcoin, you cannot do this transaction. And so this solves the problem of blockchain. This is how you can see that blockchain solves the problem of sending digital values to several people at once, the problem of double spending. And I think this is really powerful. And it's not just true for payments, but for all the data that is sent across. And so now, before we come to the go from theory to practice, I want to sort this buzzword cloud a little and maybe give you some ideas where you could spend time for learning. So when we look at blockchain, we look at nodes, which in simplified terms would be the computers that the software runs on, and cryptography or hashes, which is something really, I think, if you look at it from a business perspective, you can ignore. What's really exciting is the architecture. And so all blockchains, I would argue, are different in these 3 dimensions, control, permission, and consensus. And let me give you a quick idea what this means. So control means who is in charge, A, of letting people in, and B, making consensus or validating transactions. And so, for example, in the Bitcoin blockchain, you know, everyone can participate, and so the control is fully decentralized. Everyone could join the network, start validating transactions. Now, if we go from decentralized to fully centralized, just look at a normal database. You have one admin or one company running the database. All the others that use the database, they cannot do anything. So the control is really central. And for example, something in between would be consortium projects that we can often observe, or even something like the Libra Foundation at the moment, where there's, I think, 30, 40 members currently. They plan to make it to 100. And these 100 companies then would have the control. And permission means who can read what. For Bitcoin, again, it's totally transparent. Everyone can read everything. Now, if you join today because you work for a company and think about how could we use blockchain for us, you will most likely agree that you don't want everyone to be able to read every information that is on the blockchain when it contains maybe really confidential data about payments, about whatever. Nobody wants total transparency when it comes to private information, or we could say permission is a problem when it comes to privacy. However, there are solutions to it. There are several degrees of permissions. There's unpermissioned blockchains or permissionless blockchains like Bitcoin, and there's permission blockchains where not everyone can enter or not everyone can read all the information. And consensus is the consensus mechanism that is used. We know that Bitcoin uses proof of work, which is really has a high energy consumption, which is one of the big negatives. Actually, people would argue that the high energy consumption is part of why it's so secure, which is probably true, but still something I personally don't like too much. There's other consensus mechanisms, for example, proof of stake. We see a lot of proof of stake networks at the moment. And for example, also Ethereum, the number 2 blockchain protocol when it comes to market capitalization, will make a switch to proof of stake as well. So this is really interesting. Maybe you look into that. It solves a lot of problems that proof of work has. However, some new problems or unsolved challenges occur. So the architecture part is really interesting. And really about the rest, here applications, I would probably look into STO, smart contracts, tokenization. And maybe when you look at further attributes, just get a general understanding what these 3 mean and how scalability is directly influenced by the decisions made for the blockchain architecture. Because I think scalability really is an important question that you have to ask yourself. For example, again, if you want to use it for your company, how scalable does your platform need to be? Will it be used by 1 billion people like Facebook, or will it be used by 50 people? How many transactions will there be on? And depending on that, you might have to make certain decisions here, because otherwise it won't work. But now enough of the theory. Let's go to the practice. And here I want to talk about 3 topics. First about the digital euro, because I think it's a great foundation, then about payments in general, and then tokenization. And so for digital euro, I took 2 examples. I actually won't go into much detail there. Just one big difference. Libra is supposed to be a stable coin, and it's supposed to have a reserve of bonds, etc., and maybe also cryptocurrencies all in one basket. And this makes for these, or this ensures the stability. So the people send money to the Libra Foundation or some of their on-ramps and receive the Libra tokens. And in the meantime, the Libra reserve is made up of different kinds of bonds and other securities or money to provide a stable means of payment. But this, just to make sure, is not the digital euro per se. They might actually launch the Libra euro. But as said, I will send you a link later on. And Jonas goes into really deep into the Libra topic. Just to see the difference, right? So this is what we would call a stable coin. And Monerium actually tries to really bring the euro on the blockchain, which will happen in a way that they use e-money license. They have a banking license or have a partner with a banking license. They will issue e-money, and so it will go this way. You send money from your account, from your IBAN to an IBAN for one of the banks they work with. Then it gets transferred into an omnibus account. And when it's there, you receive tokens that give you the right for, if you tokenize 50 euros, you receive a token that gives you the right to demand payment of 50 euros from one of the participating banks. And so really, this is a little like an IOU on a blockchain and allows for instant payments in theory on a global level. And you will see soon why the digital euro is important. But just to make sure, at least personally, I view something like Monerium like a really cool solution. And we have companies in Germany working on this topic as well, and in other parts of Europe. But really, I believe this is a workaround. Why do they do it? Because companies don't, or at least the bigger companies, they don't want to be paid in Bitcoin or Ethereum. They want to receive real money. And I think this is true for a lot of private investors as well. And so they try to bring the euro on the blockchain to enable blockchain payments with, let's say, quote unquote, real money, right? And why is Monerium just a workaround? Because what would be, at least from my point of view and understanding, the optimal solution is what we called CBDC, central bank digital currencies, so that the ECB in our case would bring the euro to the blockchain, because then it wouldn't need a complicated construct or somewhat complicated construct to make it happen, but would be much easier. But as you will be aware, if you heard of the topic CBDC, which is really interesting as well, take a look at it, this will not happen overnight. So these workarounds are pretty cool, and why, we will see in the next example. And here's two startups that use, let's say, PayperUse use cases. One is called PaperChain, one is called ASOS. I chose both of them because as the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center, we have somewhat close ties to them. Let's say they are friends of the FSBC. And for that reason, I chose them. Just what can PaperChain do, or what is, let's say maybe better, what is PayperUse? Imagine you have, you lend a machine or you lease a machine, and you have a fixed fee, which is how it's done today. But maybe the fixed fee could be a little lower, let's say 50% lower, because you tell the people or the company you lease it from how much you will use it in the future, and they agree. This sounds like trustable forecasts, and they agree to only let you pay 50% of the fixed fee. However, whenever you produce something with a machine, an instant payment instant transaction is triggered and sent to the one leasing, or from the leasee to the one producing the machine. And so this would be pay-per-use, right? Because whenever something pops out of the machine, money is sent. And so what this means is that for the one leasing the machine, the downside risk is really reduced, because this company now only pays 50% of the leasing or of the fixed fee. And then as everything else is pay-per-use. However, if they have a really good year and produce a lot with this machine, it will probably mean that they pay more than they would have with the old fixed fee, which means in a really positive scenario, they earn a little less. However, one could argue this is not too bad, as it's a successful year anyways. So this is pretty cool. And also it's a cool idea because I know personally in this case some machine producers, or manufacturers, they are afraid that in certain countries the, let's say, payment morale isn't extremely high, and they are afraid that people might use their machine, not pay, and then they have to get the machine back. And so what you can do here easily is when they don't pay, they just can't produce anymore. Obviously this brings some new problems. Is this really fair? What happens to companies that maybe just have liquidity problems but are really willing to pay? I guess this would be way too deep into the use case, but just to give you an idea what payments on blockchain could mean, what pay-per-use could mean. And I think it's pretty easy to see how the same concept could be applied to machines of all kinds. It could be cars, for now, I think what's easy to understand, you could have a car that has its own wallet and that pays for stuff. We have contactless payments in cars already. I think the new Model S of a Mercedes has it as a standard. Probably it's not too affordable. But with blockchain, this is easily possible as well today. And so you go into a parking lot and pay automatically. You go through the washing street and the car pays by itself. But it gets much more exciting, maybe 10, 20 years in the future, if you believe in it, when cars drive autonomously. And then you could give your car a wallet. It could charge and earn money from driving people around. It could tank or go to the gas station by itself, or the electric gas station. and pay there. It could park somewhere. It could wash itself. Really what this is all about, the payments part, is we enable payments in IoT. We enable machines to be a somewhat autonomous part in the whole payment infrastructure that we have today, with smart contracts, really something you should look into if you don't know what it is. We can make sure that a human once decides in which range a machine can make decisions or participate in the financial markets. And from then on, it can act on its own, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of use cases about it. Maybe if you want to learn more about it first and you don't really know what it's about yet, just Google these two. I think it's really interesting. And if you Google for blockchain and IoT, you will find a lot of ways that this could be used. And also, I think now it makes sense, right? Why we need something like Monerium, or maybe a really stable cryptocurrency like Libra for it. Because if you are a SME, a traditional machine manufacturer with 300 employees, I think you don't want to be paid in Bitcoin. You want to receive something that is equal or pretty similar to the money you have dealt with your whole life. And now let's talk about tokenization. So tokenization is the idea, or I would say, you could look at the definition by the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act, which is used there because they have a great description of tokenization, or actually we have a course about it. But to make it a little shorter and high level, I would say tokenization means taking a right and moving it into a digital container that we call token. And these are rights. It could be usage rights. It could be, for example, what I said here, the rights of receiving a payment. You could pack the right of a painting in there of a car. So essentially, I would say you make assets digital, or you could also repackage digital assets. And now this is really, really cryptic. Let's look at two use cases here. And again, these are more or less friends of the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center, which is the reason why I listed it. And please be sure as well, the descriptions that I provide here are really high level, and better look into it yourself if you want to learn more about it. So Cashlink, what they do, I would say they tokenize equity, meaning, for example, company shares. Let's think of private companies. The market for private company shares currently is really, really illiquid. In Germany, at least, you have to go to the notary if someone wants to sell equity, or if you want to sell equity as a company and raise money. So this is a pretty complex, time-consuming, and also expensive process. And now tokenization means, as a founder or as a company owner, you could once go to the notary and say, hey, I want to tokenize 10% of my equity. And once it exists in tokens, you have, on the one hand, the pretty neat possibility to say, hey, these tokens, they receive the rights, or right, I said tokenization is about putting rights into a digital container. And so what rights do we put in with the equity? We could say, hey, the owner of this token has the right for dividends. And when the company is sold or something like that, and at some point the token is destroyed, he receives payment for the exit or termination value. And what you see here, what's not inside is voting rights. So it would be, I think in normal financial market terms, it would be a preferred share. You could do stuff like that. And for Cashlink or the companies that tokenize with them, the cool thing would be they are a private company and they want to raise little money, and they have their 20% tokenized of their equity. and they could give it to smaller investors. There could be a secondary market for all kinds of private company investments. And I think now you have an idea how something like this could look like. Actually, I don't know personally if they figured out how they do the dividend payments yet. And I think this is true. Now, this is equity tokenization. You can do it for debt capital as well. What they haven't figured out there is the interest payments, I guess, because often these happen in Ethereum or Stellar or something like that. But here you can see the link as well. So let's say you want to, as a maybe private investor or institutional investor, invest into private companies. Now projects like this, or this is more or less, let's say, the same for real estate, they enable you to make really specific small investments in exactly what you want. You don't have to buy a fund. You can invest in real estate or companies on a really small scale, as well as now receive all the interest or dividend payments in comparably real money and real euros. And they also offer a secondary market for asset classes that were before really illiquid, at least in theory. I would say what's reality today is that we can observe a lot of real estate tokenization in Germany, actually. But I think the markets are not really that super liquid at the moment. Why? 2 reasons. I think this is true for all kinds of tokenization at the moment, but just a personal belief. A, I think private investors are not ready to, or let's say don't have the habit to use these exchanges and asset classes to diversify their portfolio. So this is a shift that might take some years. Maybe it's never going to happen. Maybe it's there in the next weeks, who knows? And for institutional investors, I think the market size is often too small yet. So, you know, when you tokenize 5 real estate objects with a combined value of 20 million euros, it's probably not enough for a really liquid market. I think the projects or the sums need to be bigger there. But what we can see for sure is that tokenization, especially in Germany, is moving forward. And I think it's still, so I would say the digital euro and tokenization, these are 2 of the really trending topics at the moment. And when I say payments here, you could also call it IoT. And for me, obviously also the reason why I chose it, I think these are the 3 topics that are most interesting for private people, as well as people working in banks or industrial companies. So I can just advise you to look further into that. And with this, I want to close my presentation. I think I talked way too long, way longer than I thought. Anyways, I hope Benjamin has some questions. I will look at my smartphone soon, but before that, I want to actually show you 2 screenshots. First, what you can see here is the Blockchain Masterclass, or at least a high-level overview of what we do with it. It's a 12-hour online course. The technical part, I'm part of that. Apart from that, we have Günther Dobrautz, who is a partner at PwC or an attorney as well. He covers the legal part. We have implementation and application, which is both covered by Philipp Sandner, the head of the Blockchain Center, as well as Nathalie Tillack, who is a ex-McKinsey consultant and has been really active in the blockchain sphere. And yeah, this is this. Oh, sorry. And what we also started is our YouTube channel. And so, I mean, now you have the opportunity, right? Now, because we live stream here on YouTube, you are just 1 click away from the channel. And we have started something new, which is called Industry Insights. The idea behind it is that I talked a lot about friends of the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center. And currently I talk with a lot of them if they want to share their knowledge. And actually they really do. And we are in the post-productions for quite a lot of courses. But what we have at the moment is 1, I talked about Jonas Kroos, who talks about Libra. And then we have Philipp Sandner, who talks about digital money. And I think this is really interesting because we will actually have 2 more lectures, let's say about, about this part, about the digital euro. But all 4 will have a different perspective. And I think it will give you a really good idea what this topic is about. But we will also have more presentations about use cases. And then, the lecturers are people that have been working in the blockchain space or have using the technology for quite a while. And they share their expertise. And while this really comprehensive 12-hour class obviously costs some money, these will be for free. And so make sure to check out this YouTube channel every once in a while, because we really try to build a blockchain knowledge hub that provides great, at least high-level education for blockchain. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Stefan. We don't have that much questions so far, so please, if you're interested, you have some kind of question, please just post it in the chat box. But the first question we have is about the European markets and the adoption of blockchain, probably use cases, where Can Yildiz says that yes, he doesn't expect the German digitalization process to be so quick in the next 10 years, and he's asking you or us what's going to happen on the European level in the next 10 years, and to challenge also his assumption that Germany isn't front-running.
Challenge the assumption that Germany is front-running?
Is not front-running, so a bit reluctant when it comes down to digitalization as such.
I mean, I think when we look at digitalization in general, we can clearly see that Europe isn't having a great role at the moment. I mean, one of the most promising fintechs that we had, it doesn't exist or is now bankrupt, Wirecard. I really believe that when we look at blockchain Europe, we see a lot of hesitation. Actually, just to give you some insights, this is a part of the Blockchain project that Benjamin and I are working on. So we will also consult together with the others, the European Union, on policy recommendations, how they could create an ecosystem in which technology of all sorts, but also blockchain, can thrive. So they are interested, but I think movement on a European level takes some time. However, what I am sure what we can say is that Germany, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein, and now, funnily enough, only one is part of the European Union, and these three countries take a leading role when it comes to blockchain. I think, or I believe, all 3 of them have a really different approach when it comes to blockchain. Germany first regulating what I talked about, the custody for digital assets, making it a BaFin licensed financial service. I think, and I said that as well, this is a really important step because it gives some certainty. Liechtenstein and Switzerland, they took different approaches. In Switzerland, you have to convince the FINMA that what you do is good. In Liechtenstein, they have the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act, which is really broad and touches on a lot of topics. So all 3 countries have different approaches. I would say that currently all other European countries are watching these 3 and hope that maybe one of these approaches will prove to be successful, or maybe a mix out of it. And I think they also expect the European Union to take a leading role here and make sure that change doesn't happen on a country level, but a Europe-wide level, because I think for a technology like blockchain, only this makes sense. And so I would say that Europe in total, we have a lot of great startups of all different kinds. We have 3 countries that really, and obviously we have countries like Estonia as well. I don't want to forget them. We have some countries that really embrace the technology. Yeah, and others that are watching it. But in general, I think we still have a pretty good position. However, I think it's just important to say, however, in comparison to China, obviously, when we look at government funding, research grants, everything like that, we are a little slower. Then again, I think you cannot compare Europe to China or the European Union. So I think we are looking quite good here. I really hope that now with Germany having the blockchain strategy, we will see some good developments here that maybe lead the European Union to implement some changes that really make the blockchain market here strive. And I also know that the European Central Bank looks at CBDC really closely. So I think we can expect quite some changes in the scope that you gave in the next 10 years. But I think it will take some time, and I really don't want to say what changes we will see, but because I think this is really just looking into the, how do you say, into like a magic ball and trying to prophesize the future, and I really don't want to do that.
All right, then we have Andreas Wismeier. He's not posting a question, but he's saying that it would be a great use case for a CBDC if the European Union would distribute the Corona aid, yes, as a CBDC. And so the point for him is that money can only be used for a specific purpose or reason. Yeah, maybe you can just outline a few sentences regarding this topic.
Yes, I think this really refers to what we understand under a token, or in the blockchain term, a utility token, that you can send or transfer tokens to someone that give them the right to do something with it. For example, buy food. And it would also make sure that the one receiving the token, so, you know, I get the token from some EU Corona aid agency, whatever. And when I pay with it somewhere, these people would receive the EU funds as a consequence also instantly. I think this is a pretty cool idea. And I believe we will see the first applications on that, maybe not in Europe itself, but really when it comes to aid programs in Africa by the UN maybe, and others. I'm looking for the right word. Everywhere where you could donate money, and I think for the nations, it would make a lot of sense when you support social projects to have the transparency to fight stuff like bribery and corruption. I think the transparency of blockchain could be really helpful there.
Perfect. So maybe the last question is from Kirill Mitrov. He's asking on your opinion on China's CBDC and the implication for global monetary and financial markets.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I have to admit, Kirill, that I'm not an expert on CBDCs. For that, I can also just guide you to, let me see. I think it's the third link to our playlist where Philipp Sandner talks about the topic. And he will go a little deeper into that. Personally, I believe that I think it can just be a good development in general. Obviously, without getting too political, I would have preferred if Europe would be the first country to come up with a CBDC. But nevertheless, I think, you know, as soon as you have one central bank digital currency that people agree on using, we could also use it here in Germany. And I mean, it would feel strange if we do our payments in, what is it, renminbi. but then you would have instant exchange at your bank into euro again. So I think there might be a small FX risk. But yeah, I think it could be used here in Europe as well. I don't know if it will come this way. And I think it's really difficult to assess the China's project at the moment, as well as the global implications. I think this again is, at least for me, just lucky guesses and looking into the future, and I don't want to do that. I think it's for sure a project that one should observe, and I think time will tell how it goes, and then also how it impacts us. But at least I cannot really comment on it.
Yes, maybe I can just add here that I think for Europe and Germany as such, it's just putting a lot of pressure on Europe, Germany, maybe the US. So regardless what's happening in China in detail, I think it's very beneficial for the whole blockchain space, because China is really going forward. And yes, other countries or the European Union, they just have to decide and act quicker, as they definitely would if there wasn't a player involved like China. And,
yes, I absolutely agree.
And maybe to wrap it up, Stefan Oliver, he's not posting a question either, but he's looking forward for blockchain use cases in healthcare. Maybe Stefan, if you want, you can add a few sentences. I could as well, as you like.
And then let me start with it. Yeah, sure. Me too. I think there's actually two really interesting different use cases that don't really have to do with what we talked about today, because today it was all about, let's say, payments. Payments were involved in maybe all of these use cases. I guess for the healthcare sector, what you could have is really digital registries of health data. You could give the patients control over their data, but also make it quickly accessible around about the globe, which could be extremely interesting. It might also drastically change how research and data analysis of patient data works at the moment. But then again, I'm no healthcare specialist. And secondly, I think it will for sure, or blockchain might affect all the, or blockchain and supply chain management, I think is one really well-known use case, which will also affect the healthcare industry in a sense that it will probably make sure that the medicine is actually working, that you have a cooling chain, that everything in the production, delivery, etc. Exactly happened the way it's supposed to, and otherwise the drugs will be replaced. And secondly, I also think it might be really useful for counterfeiting or fighting counterfeit drugs. I know that some pharma companies look at that already. However, I would have no idea how far they are. And maybe Benjamin, you can add something to that if you want.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it touches two topics here. And this is, first of all, as Stefan said, for personal data, you need, first of all, you need decentralized identities or identities on the blockchain system, so you can somehow store this data and transfer it. And on the other hand, that's what we are working on our project Blockchain. Obviously, it touches a lot of critical issues regarding the general data protection regulation. So GDPR is, I would say, one of the biggest issues right now in the sector, because the startups which are working here, they have obviously to comply with all the rules, and at the same time to make sure that they don't violate rules. They have to use the most sophisticated techniques, I would say, there are. So this is not at all easy right now, but also, as Stefan said, it is tough to say right now, but I would expect some very smart and helpful solutions in the next few years. but probably not this year and maybe not the next year, but in the upcoming years. I think the regulatory perspective will be a bit easier for companies to grasp, and also companies working in the field, they will maybe start to realize how the technology is working. Yeah. So that would be it. So thank you very much for participating and listening. We will send you a link with the YouTube video in the next couple of days. And yes, thank you very much and have a great day.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.